a very warm welcome to the second day of the 6 days online workshop on communication skills. And we are very fortunate to have with us a person who is not only well read in her own field, but is thoroughly comfortable with the communication skills also. So I take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Deepti Dharmani. And I would also like to thank our principal for his wholehearted support for this event to be a success. And I'm very happy that so many of our students are joining. Ma'am, I would like to share with you that it is not only our college students, but there are students from other colleges of SR and also from other districts. Yesterday we had students from Ambala and Bhiwani also.
That's good.
The day one started with Professor Rajneesh Arora, and he enlightened the students with what actually communication skills are. And he told them as to how they have to work on to improve their communication skills. So, not wanting to stand between the students and our very erudite speaker, I would like to say a few words about Dr. Deepti Dharmani before she takes on to the stage. Dr. Deepti Dharmani has a teaching experience of more than 36 years at college and university and has been a professor since July 2011 at Department of English, Chaudhry Devilal University, Sirsa. She has done her postdoctoral fellowship at Osmania University, Hyderabad. Her area of specialization, though, is Afro-American literature, but her scope of teaching is American literature, women's studies, and English language teaching. Ma'am has written 4 books, published 20 papers, written 4 chapters, 3 proceedings, and 3 popular articles. She has supervised 35 research scholars for MPhil dissertation and 8 scholars for PhD. Her list of achievements is very long. She has held key assignments as Dean Academic Affairs, Dean of Education, and Dean of Social Sciences. Currently, she is the chairperson of Department of Hindi, Punjabi, Sanskrit, and Department of Journalism and Mass Communication. She has also been VC nominee in governing bodies of various affiliated colleges. Ma'am, we are indeed proud to have you with us for today's session and are very grateful to you for giving us your valuable time from your very busy schedule. And before ma'am starts, my request to all the students to kindly keep posting their questions in the chat box. It would be really nice if they can interact with a person who can help them with their queries. And over to Dr. Deepti Dharmani.
Thank you, Dr. Shami Nagpalji. I'm very happy to interact with you and the students. The more the students I interact with, the happier I become. Slight correction in the introduction that you have given. I'm no longer the chairperson of Department of Hindi, Sanskrit, and Punjabi or Journalism. My tenure is over. I'm only chairperson of Department of English. So, good morning, students, fellows. You have already been introduced to the concept of communication. Well, whenever I am asked to speak on communication, my preferred area is listening skills. It is listening because listening is the most it's not only the fundamental aspect of communication, it is the most significant and problematic area also. You see, when I ask you to learn learning, mostly students or people foo-foo the idea, well, what is there to learn about listening? We listen. Well, had you been listening, your mother or parents would not have asked you to listen carefully. Or the teacher would not have demanded, listen carefully, or the judge in the courtroom would not hampered his hammer on the table. It means that there is something wrong when listening process goes on. Now, what are the major areas of problem in listening? Before I start with the PPT, I would like to uh, I would like to share with you certain problems and certain episodes in my life which prompted me into understanding what is listening. I have a very respectable teacher who is blind, and I was always impressed by the way he recognized people by the voice. He never missed even a single thing when we said something. And I asked, well, sir, you are a gifted person. You have a gifted sense of hearing and listening. And he said, no, it is not that we are gifted. It is because we don't have sight, therefore, we sharpen our sense of listening. So, listening is something which is very, very fundamental. It's so fundamental that the person who does not hear does not speak. You see, most of the people who are dumb are deaf. So it is that fundamental. So let us start with the PPD. And I start with some of the quotations, which are very, very vital and which will also bring home to you the significance of listening. We have 2 ears, but one mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. Man's ability to communicate is the result of his failure to listen effectively. Most of the successful people I have known are the ones who do more listening than talking. I think the one lesson that I have learned is that there is no substitute to paying attention. You are educated and you have the ability to listen almost anything without losing your temper and your self-confidence. Well, these are the quotes which I have taken from some other people. And thus we do come to this agreement. Well, listening is very, very important. And it is so important that if we want to develop our communication skills, we must first of all become good listeners. Well, my next slide. I'm unable to see myself in the screen, so I'm unable to see whether the screen is, well, come to page 3. Well, I have already done it. Please come to the next page. Come to the next page. Well, what is communication? I will not concentrate on this topic because you have already done it. There are two theories basically. One is the linear theory and the other is the cyclic theory. So communication does not just mean speaking. This is a big, big misconception. So listening, communication has 4 fundamental skills in it. Listening is the first, speaking is the second, and third is, you see, I have just reversed the serial of these two. People start with speaking, but I start with listening because people speak a language when they listen to that language. So reading and writing, these are the 4 fundamental skills that we have under communication. And it's a circular a process because communication does not just mean that you just say anything and that is done. Communication means that if I am delivering a lecture, I am speaking, you are listening, so even there it does not stop. It means that if you are listening, you are able to understand what I'm saying or what I mean. So my intention and your reception must be equalized. Only then it means communication. Now I give you one example. If you go to Himachal Pradesh, for example, and you happen to stop by a wayside dhaba and ask for a matti with tea, you see, you will be beaten, brutally beaten, because matti is a beautiful girl there. So you are using one code, but that code has different meaning in the other area or dialect. So that causes a problem. Similarly, if I say she's comely, so you understand that she is insane, but in fact, I use the word in English, which means handsome and beautiful. So communication means that you share a common code, and the meaning that I intend to convey, the feeling that I intend to convey, the signal that I want to give is interpreted in the same manner in which it is given. So Peter Ducker is gives a very important statement. It says the most important thing in communication is hearing what it isn't said. What isn't said. Now this is very important because sometimes the meaning lies not in the words. It lies in the context. Sometimes it lies beyond the context. So communication is a very complex process. And in order to develop communication skills properly, we must first of all understand holistically what communication exactly means. Now, coming to listening and listening comprehension, you see, first of all, we must, do away with this misconception that listening means hearing. Hearing is involuntary, hearing is accidental, hearing is unintentional. And on the other hand, listening is voluntary, it is intentional, and it is not accidental, it is purposeful. Like, you are all listening to me because you are listening to me with the purpose to understand what is exactly communication. So here we totally, dispel with this idea that listening is hearing. Hearing is something which is automatic. And you see, sometimes it is not even automatic because we see only what we want to see and we listen only what we want to listen. So you may be hearing, but you may not be listening. According to Tomlinson, listening is the ability to identify and understand what others are saying. Very simple thing. Now, listening comprehension is regarded as a complex, interactive process. It's an interactive process because if I'm saying something, you are trying to understand and interpret what I am saying. There might be certain clarifications that you might need, and there might be certain questions you might be compelled to ask me. So, this process will ultimately be completed only when it becomes an interactive process. So it is an interactive process in which listeners are involved in a dynamic construction of meaning. Dynamic construction of meaning because I am using certain sounds, and these sounds are woven into words. Words are also woven into sentences and so on. So this utterance exactly has a meaning, and until unless you deconstruct the meaning, this process, dynamic process, does not complete. So listeners understand the oral input from the sound discrimination, prior knowledge of vocabulary, grammatical structures, stress and intonation, as well as other use of linguistic, paralinguistic, and even non-linguistic clues in contextual utterance. Now, this is something which is very complex. I will take one by one. First of all, you must also be able to distinguish between the sounds. Sounds means if I say the word director, you must not understand it as actor. And then prior knowledge of the vocabulary. Well, if I'm using any word which does not fall into your working vocabulary, there will be problem and there will not be listening. And grammatical structures. You must also understand the structures that I'm using, these types of sentences I'm using, whether it's an interrogative, it's a negative, or it's an imperative, and how the meaning is woven into such structures. Then the stress and intonation carries the attitudinal function. Sometimes these also perform intonation also performs grammatical function too. And then you see, when we are speaking, though this is, you see, an online lecture, but when we are listening to a person face to face in a physical setting, the speaker makes a lot of gestures with the body. The eyes are moving, the eyes convey certain meaning. So sometimes, you see, you must have also realized that the other person says yes, but the body seems to be saying no. So here the meaning is being, the body language, the paralinguistic features are contradicting the meaning of the lexical that is being used. So non-linguistic clues and paralinguistic features are as important as our linguistic codes in order to have proper understanding of what is being said. Now, uh, in spite of the fact that listening is the most fundamental aspect of communication, it is also the most ignored aspect of communication. See, according to certain thinkers, we spend almost 80 to 90% of our time in communication, and out of 80 to 90% of our communication uh, activities, speaking forms 30% and listening forms 45%, reading is 16%, and writing comes only to 9%. And in, you see from the data that I'm giving you or that you see on the screen shows that listening is the most important and it is most substantial part of communication. I only wish I could find an institute that teaches people how to listen. Now, this was one of the quotations. And you see, if you when you go to the work field, which type of workers are most preferred? Are these you see, if you are a good teacher, does it mean that the good teacher is a teacher who speaks well, or the good teacher is a teacher who listens to the students? Form your opinion. I know that you will say it is both, but fundamentally, you appreciate a teacher who listens to the students. And similarly, every employer, when looks for a worker or an employee, the expectation for communication skill is 40%, and the substantial part of it is that they want the salesperson, the marketeers, the bosses, and the officers to be able to listen properly. Now, listening is a most significant aspect, just as I had discussed, and it is so significant that if you look into the Indian culture and Indian literary heritage, we find that there are myths, legends, folk tales, stories, and all our Vedas and the entire Vedic literature was on the basis of Shruti. They were not written, they were heard, and they were communicated, they were spoken to the disciples. The disciples listened to those shlokas and they memorized them. So the entire Vedic culture, Vedic literature is based on Shruti and Smriti. And this is what is exactly listening. Dynamic processing, you see, in the present moment is that you are acknowledging and responding. So when I am speaking in my class or I'm teaching in my class, I always find my students sometimes nodding, sometimes they are blank. Most of the time, I find they are basically on vacation. They are on listening vacation, means they are not listening at all. So it means listening means that you are concentrating purposefully and you are not letting yourself be distracted, and that you are paying attention to, you are focusing on what the speaker is saying to in totality, paying attention to how the body is responding, and then drawing out meaning. So it also means empathetic to the speaker's feelings and thoughts, that if you are listening to some other person, it means that you are trying to understand the feelings, the ideas, the thoughts, and the condition of the speaker in which he is speaking or she is speaking. Suspending one's own thoughts and feelings to give attention solely to his listening. Now, you see, one of the problem areas in listening is that when a speaker speaks, there is a limitation, physical limitation. I can speak only 200 to 250 words a minute. But the mind has a capacity to think in 300 and more than 350 words per minute. So we find that there is a big gap between the capacity of the speaker to speak and the capacity of the listener's mind to think. You see, that gap is very important, and this gap makes you distract. This makes you distract because if I say, well, you see, if you want to check your listening skills, just go and watch a movie and then try to repeat the dialogues of, you see, the moment I speak film, your mind jumps to think of some film that you saw recently, and then your mind goes from one end to the other, from the other to another, and it goes on in a chain of thought, and you miss what I am speaking. So this gap is very, very crucial, and how we are going to fill it up is a thing that is very, very important. So we find that listening is it's a very, very complex process. Now, the second part is that you had been attending your classes all through, and you find that when you are in the examination hall, you don't remember what the teacher had said. Does it mean that you had not listened to the teacher? Or does it mean something else? Well, I tell you the answer. The answer is that the mind has the capacity to listen, in more capacity to think than the physical ability to speak. But equally important is, the moment you go out of the class, the moment you stop listening to a person, a substantial part is leaked from the memory. Now it leaks from the memory. The next day, something more goes out of the mind. And when you are to appear for your exam or your test, you find that hardly 20 to 30% of the things that you listened are with you. That means there is problem of retention, there is problem of remembering. And the more the problem of listening, the more the problem of retention and remembering. So listening has to be a very, very well thoughted, purposeful, and voluntary process in which you have to train yourself to concentrate on what is being said. You have to um, build up your vocabulary and knowledge of language so that you have a good working vocabulary. And the moment the word is spoken, your mind is able to interpret it and thus understand the meaning. Now, listening components, you see, listening is not just hearing, I told you. It means discriminating sounds, one sound from the other, recognizing words, understanding their meaning, interpreting the meaning as per the context, and understanding the paralinguistic and non-linguistic cues. Now, it means that we are going from the content to the context. Now, effective, you see, there will be, when we discuss listening, we use most of the time two terms: active listening and passive listening. You see, I just said a few minutes earlier that we see only what we want to see and we hear only what we want to hear. It means that, first of all, we must be mentally prepared to listen. Now, there are certain barriers to listening. So most of the time, you see, you must also accept to yourself, at least, if not to others, that in the classroom, you had not been listening, though the teacher thought that you were listening. So most of the time, the students are pseudo listeners. And even in our day-to-day communication, we are pseudo listeners. That means we pretend to be listening, but we are not listening. And sometimes we are selective listeners. We are selective listeners because we select things that we are interested in. So sometimes we don't listen to the others because we are not interested in the person. Sometimes we don't listen because we are not interested in the particular subject or the content. And sometimes we don't listen because we are hypersensitive to the noises. Now, this word noise means shore in Hindi. But when I say hypersensitive to noises, it might mean sounds that are going on around us, which are unwelcoming, or it might be the certain other noises which are coming from within your body. Like if you are feeling an itching in your one part of your body, your listening will be hampered. So, you see, most of the time you must have heard, भाई अगर आपने पूजा करनी हो तो बिना नहाए धोए नहीं बैठना. ना नहाने धोने का मतलब, it is not that you are purifying yourself and that without bathing you cannot remember God. It is only because if you are remembering God and you are sitting down to pray to God, you need full concentration. And if your body is not purified in the sense that you have not bathed yourself, your body is not clean, your body might have some itching somewhere, so your concentration would be lost. So we have to interpret the word purification in that context. Now, effective and active listening, you see, words 10%, body language 55%, tone and tenor 35%. That means if you are listening carefully to any speaker, you only pay attention to need to pay attention to the words, only 10% of the attention needs to be paid to it. 55% of it will go to the body, how the body is speaking, and 35% to how the accent is going, how what is the tone and attitude of the speaker. Now, process, it's listening, I told you, is a complex process. It's not as simple as hearing, because you hear, you don't remember the things. So hearing is only a sensuous activity, and listening is a conscious activity. Understanding. Listening also involves understanding and interpretation, grasping the intended meaning, when it is said, what it is said, why it is said, how it is said, and what is not said. Then it also means remembering. So, whatever is being said, that content, that idea, that feeling, that thought has to be retained in the mind, the storehouse of mind. And then we evaluate it according, you see, the data that has come into your brain. You see, I have used a lot of data today so far, and I want you to remember that data, but I don't want you to only remember it. I want you to evaluate it and relate to your personal experiences of listening. So when you are listening, you are not inactive, you are active, and sometimes an entire body is responding to that. Now, purpose. What is the purpose of listening? You need to listen because you need some information. You need to listen because you want to entertain yourself. You need to listen to some people because you want to take inspiration. You need to listen to some people because you have certain problems and you want answers to those problems, and you want to solve those problems. Or you might also listen because some question is being asked and you are to answer that question. So listening is a very, very important activity. Now, I have already touched upon it, but I will do it further in an elaborate manner, that there are certain factors that hinder communication because that hinder listening. Now, physical noise. Physical noise are the external noises. You see, sometimes I speak on the public platforms and I tell them that most of the schools and most of the colleges are situated on the national highways, and classes are often conducted in the open. I have one college in Sessa which is situated on the just opposite to the bus stand, and the students sitting on the upper floor on the window side are always being hampered for their listening because they are being interrupted by the physical noise that is coming of buses, the horns and the other noises. And sometimes you see they cannot help their eyes seeing, watching outside. So these are physical noises. These are environmental distractions. And there are physiological noises. Now, you see, most of the time I find my students come without having a proper breakfast. You see, that gives that creates a physiological noise. So most of the time, if they come in the classroom, either they are undernourished or they are overnourished. या तो वो दो परांठे खाए होंगे, so that food is so toxic that the moment they sit in the classroom and this teacher starts speaking, they start dozing off. Now that is what is physiological noise. If you are sick, if you are not energetic, if you are feeling sleepy, if you are feeling hungry, your listening will be hampered. Then there are certain psychological noise. Now, what is that psychological noise? Will you don't like a teacher and you don't listen to the teacher. So that is what, if you like the person, you listen to the person. So that is one of the psychological noise. There are psychophysiological noises also, and that is what I have talked about. Sometimes your brain fades. Sometimes there are extrapolations. Extrapolations, just as I told you, I mentioned the word film. Your mind jumped to some other thought, and then you extrapolated. You extrapolated what I have said and what you have read somewhere, or you have listened to someone else saying. So these are extrapolations. So your mind is physiologically and psychologically extrapolating what I am saying with what you have read and what you have already heard. And there are semantic noises also. Semantic noises means that I'm using such structures, such words which are not usually in the working vocabulary of the listener. So they distort the meaning. You see, you have a very good example in Julius Caesar. For example, you see there is a procession going on, and people are agitating. One of the person comes, he says, "Who are you?" And he says, "I am mender of the souls." He is actually a cobbler, and he uses the word in a ambiguous manner. So if I use purposefully ambiguity or pun or such things, I am distracting the listener from understanding. Now, what are the advantages of good listening? See, best people in our lives are those who are good listeners, who listen to whatever you are saying. So listening involves a lot of patience, and it creates a lot of patience in you. And the moment you learn listening to others, the moment you start empathizing and understanding others, you become a good person, and your relationships improve. So it shows your respect for and acceptance of other people. It helps you to understand other needs and feelings and worries. Let you understand the points of views that are different from yours. You see, most of the time when we enter into communication or debate with some other people, we become so jealous and dribbler. We want only ourselves to speak, and we don't want to listen to others. We want to impose our own ideas on others, and we want them to accept our ideas. Well, communication does not only mean that you are, whatever I am saying, you will accept it and accept it as truth. Told you, listening has evaluation, listening has interpretation as a very, very important dimension of it. And therefore, whatever I am saying, you are to relate the entire, you see, lecture to your own life experiences, and then try to interpret how far this lecture has been beneficial to you. And only then the listening process ends. So it allows you to learn new material and facts. So if you listen to others, you broaden your perspective of the world. Not only you broaden the perspective of the world, you also you see have a more insightful knowledge of the facts. So it builds trust in relationship. It requires you to actively take part in an interaction rather than being passive and detached. Often helps reduce tension and upset in others just by being listened to. Helps develop your patience. Of I have already talked. Often reduces or stops any anger that you may feel towards someone due to your increased understanding of him. So the more you listen, the more you understand the person, and the less you will be angry and annoyed with the person concerned. So listening is very, very important. It increases your employability. It increases the quality of your understanding. It increases the quality of your interpersonal relationships. So you must agree to me that listening is something which is fundamental to life. Types of listening, I have already discussed some of it. So we listen to, you see, if we are giving full focus to the speaker, we are having full listening, deep listening, reflective listening. and we are rebuffing divergence. We are, you see, even if there is noise, my mind willfully ignores that noise, and whether coming from outside or from my within my body, refraining from side conversation, looking into eyes directly, posturing, nodding, understanding, using para linguistic signs, and listening to body language. Now, you see, most of the time I talked about pseudo listening earlier, and I told you that pseudo listening means that you are not listening, but you show yourself as, you behave as if you are listening. So this is one strategy that most of the time the students or while attending to long discourses on religion or politics we do adopt. But there is selective listening also. That is, we are not interested. See, sometimes listening is driven by the person. It is person oriented. Sometimes it is content oriented. That is, so you listen. Sometimes you are interested in the person, that's why you are listening. So there has been selective listening. Sometimes we indulge in selective listening because we just ignore the difficult part of it and try to understand what is easily graspable. So that also becomes selective listening. Listening can be sympathetic. I told you listening can be sympathetic when you are not interrupting, when you are letting the speaker speak. Most of the time, you see, when you are not interested in listening, what people do is they start asking questions which are nonsensical because they want to interrupt the process of listening. So facilitative listening is when you extend your opinion, when you are honest to others, and when you are asserting your views, then you are indulging into a facilitative listening. So listening is not just listening. Listening can be of various types. Now, what are the things that you must do if you want to improve your listening? First of all is that you must stop talking. You cannot listen to others when you are talking. And then you must put the speaker at ease. You see, if you are annoyed with the speaker, you see, one thing that I usually tell and discuss with my students is that see, teaching is a communication. Teaching is a communication, and it is a cyclic process too. And the moment you see, it's not only communication, I also say that it is like a do it. If the students are not interested in listening, the teacher will not work hard and deliver a good lecture. You are paying attention to compels the teacher to deliver the lecture effectively. So if you want the teachers to be effective speakers, you must also be effective listener. So you must put the speaker at ease and let the speaker say whatever, how much time she or he is taking. Show the other person that you want to listen. Not only you are interested in listening. See, I was narrated an episode by one of my teachers who went abroad for a lecture, and he said when he entered the classroom, there were certain students who were sitting. Nobody got up from the bench or the chair. He was not greeted. He went there, started his lecture. He felt that the students were not listening to him. Their body language was such. But the moment the teacher ended his lecture, he was bombarded with questions. That means all of them, though seeming not to be paying attention to the speaker, were actually listening to him. And so attentive they were that they have you see several points for clarification, and they had several problems to raise. So it means that they were very, very attentive listeners. So remove distractions. If you want to listen to a lecture or you are listening to somebody, try to not pay attention to what is going on around you. So create an environment that is conducive to listening. Empathizing, be patient, holding your temper. If you lose your temper, the speaker will stop speaking. Go easy on arguments and criticism. That is very important. You see, it is very easy to criticize and it is very difficult to listen. It requires a lot of patience. It requires a lot of caliber to be able to interpret and understand the perspective of the speaker. And this is what is democracy. Democracy is not government of the people, for the people, by the people. Democracy means that you try to understand the perspective of the other. So go easy on arguments and criticism, which is dues, which comes into dues. So if you are listening carefully, you will be having a lot of problems. You will have a lot of points for clarification. Ask them, encourage them. Now, these are the things that you must not do if you want to indulge in active listening. Ask questions that cannot be answered with yes or no or one word. Nod if you understand and ask for clarification if you not do. Use appropriate eye contacts. Do not cross your arms or legs or lean back. These are non-verbal turn-offs. That is, if you are your body is laxed in the classroom, you are not sitting in any attentive position, the teacher becomes not the teacher is discouraged from speaking. Don't stand or sit too close. This often interrupts as a violation of personal space and makes the other person uncomfortable. So your spacing between the people must be appropriate. Appropriate as to the relationship that you are in. Lean slightly forward when sitting. Clasp hands. Let them rest in your lap. This translates as interested. If standing, face the person. Let your arms rest at your side. This translates as openness. Touch your face with your hand from time to time. This translates as thoughtfulness and contemplative. So when you are listening, you are also using paralinguistic features. Facial expressions and tone of voice are very, very important in communication. It is not so much what you say as how much you say that is important. So we come to the first part of the first slide of my PPT. Now, again, we have 2 ears, but one mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. Man's ability to communicate is the result of his failure to listen effectively. Most of the successful people I have known are the ones who do more listening than talking. I think the one lesson that I have learned is that there is no substitute to paying attention. And you are educated when you have the ability to listen almost anything about without losing your temper and your self confidence. Very, very important last point. It is not that you become so good a listener that you let anybody say anything that the person wants. And if the person wants to cow you down, the person wants to be coercive, that the person wants to break your self confidence and you let that go because you want to be a good listener, well, that is one of the don'ts in good listening. So my lecture is open to questions if you have any.
Hello, thank you, ma'am. The students, thank you very much for such insight into listening. And I fully agree with you that this is one area that has been totally missing from our scenario. There are some questions that have been put in the chat box by the students. I'll put them to you one by one. One question that has been put by a student is if there are any active exercises or drills that can be used to improve the listening. Ma'am, do I need to repeat or have you got the question? Hello? Ma'am, you need to unmute yourself.
You can listen to a speech on the internet, listen to the speech, and then try to reproduce it. Listen to a speech and try to reproduce it. That becomes one drill. Listen to a song and try to recapitulate. Now, you see, I have given you one lecture. Now, the drill is now what is the percentage of listening in total communication? If you had been a good listener, you must have paid attention to 45% that I used, right? So whenever you listen to the news that is being broadcast, and listen to the news, and the moment the news broadcast finishes, try to pen it down. So it will drill you into listening. Sometimes you see you are not able to understand the accent. So if you listen more to the accent, the more comfortable you will be in interpreting. So for example, watch some English movies. Watch English movies which are American. Watch some movie or some soap opera which is British, and you will see the difference between the language. You will find that it is easy to understand a British movie than to understand uh, an American one, because of the change in the accent, and because Indian accent is closer to British accent than it is. You see, if I say dance, you understand. If I say dancing, then you see the accent changes. So try to be familiar with the more accents of that language, and then you will find yourself. So there can be a lot of drills. You can listen to the songs, reproduce it. Just as you see, sometimes we go on the go to birthday parties, and we find that there are certain articles which are kept in a tray. They are shown to you for a minute, and then you are asked to write the names of those articles. So this is one of the drill that is done to increase the memory. So similarly, there can be certain things which you are interested in. Supposing if you are interested in some drama, you see, watch a drama on the YouTube, try to reproduce the dialogues. So your listening drill will be there.
Ma'am, another question that has been more than a question, it's a query. Anju Sangwan wants to know why should we concentrate on English when our mother
No, no,
tongue is
no,
Hindi?
not in English. You see, communication and listening is required in any language that you are doing. I said listening is very important in interpersonal relationships, and we are not speaking English at homes. So it doesn't mean that मैं अगर अंग्रेजी में बोल रही हूँ तो आप उसको सिर्फ इंग्लिश में ही, because it is not in communication skills in English. It is communication skills in general. So it is applied to any language. तो आप अगर घर में भी देखिए, घर में सबसे अच्छे बच्चे कौन से होते हैं? माँ को सबसे अच्छे बच्चे कौन से लगते हैं? वही लगते हैं जो माँ की बात को सुनते हैं, है ना? सुनने का मतलब क्या है कि केवल उसकी बात को सुनते नहीं है, उसको समझते भी है और उसको मानते भी है, तब वो लिसनिंग होती है। नहीं तो माँ कहती जा मैं तेरी बात नहीं सुनती। नहीं सुनती का मतलब ये नहीं है कि तुम कहोगे कि मैंने ये खाना है और वो कहेगी कि मैं नहीं बनाती, लेकिन सुनने का मतलब है कि आई डोंट अंडरस्टैंड, आई विल नॉट फॉलो यू, आई विल नॉट agree to what you are saying. So it means listening is not just hearing. It requires it is a long process, and it's a complex process, and it is very, very important both at workplace and at home.
Ma'am, there are two questions, and I'm putting both the questions together because one student wants to know how listening can be converted into hearing, and the other student wants to know how hearing can be converted into listening. So I'm putting both the questions together to you.
Well, जैसे मैं अब आपके पास में लेक्चर दे रही हूँ और मेरे घर के पीछे से एक कार जा रही है, मैं उसको हियर कर रही हूँ, लेकिन since I am concentrating on the lecture, therefore I ignore it. I ignore all the distractions. मान लो मेरे घर अगर सब्जी वाला भी इसी दौरान आया है, उसने बेल बजाई है, मैंने उसको इग्नोर कर दिया है, I have not paid attention to it. This is how hearing is ignored and listening is promoted. Listening को आप हियरिंग में कैसे कन्वर्ट करोगे? वेल, लिसनिंग में हियरिंग इंट्यूटिव ही है, उसके अंदर इंक्लूसिव है। हियरिंग से तो प्रोसेस शुरू होना है, ठीक है, लेकिन हियरिंग में इंटरप्रिटेशन नहीं है, हियरिंग में अंडरस्टैंडिंग नहीं है, हियरिंग में इवैल्यूएशन नहीं है, ठीक है। तो हियरिंग इज द बेसिक बेसिक थिंग। अगर हम अगर कोई रास्ते में कोई चलते हुए कोई चीख मार रहा है और हम उसको सुनेंगे, लेकिन अगर हम अपने थॉट्स में एब्जॉर्ब हैं या हम कुछ भी कर रहे हैं तो हम उसको इग्नोर कर देंगे, लेकिन वी डू हियर। हियरिंग का मतलब है कि हियरिंग डज नॉट मीन दैट it is converted into listening automatically. It will convert into listening only when you do it purposefully, you do it voluntarily, you do it intensively and with the focus of the mind.
Thank you, ma'am. Some students want to know if your PPTs can be shared with them.
Yeah, there is one or two words spelled wrong. You can share it.
Fine, ma'am. And thank you so much for answering all their queries and giving so much insight into listening. Before I call
Shami,
Dr. Chavi Mangla
Shami,
to
Shami, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting, but try to understand one thing in life, that we see only things we want to see. So seeing is
yes,
not watching, hearing is not
absolutely.
listening.
Absolutely, absolutely. Ma'am, before I call Dr. Chavi Mangla to thank you formally, I'd like to share with you that in today's session, we had students from Faridabad, Jeend, Karnal, Ambala, Darbhanga, Bihar, and
Very
Alibag. So I feel
good.
very happy and proud that we had students from such far off destinations.
Congratulations for turning into a national UC
Yes,
program.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And now I would invite Dr. Chavi Mangla for the formal vote of thanks. And thank you from my side personally, ma'am, once again.
Welcome, dear.
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible, ma'am? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yeah.
Chavi, you are audible, Chavi. You can go
Okay.
on.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our worthy speaker, Professor Deepthi Dharmani, for delivering a wonderful talk. Thank you very much, ma'am. You very nicely explained the importance of listening in communication skills. You emphasized on listening comprehension and how listening is not only about hearing words, rather, it is also the capability of understanding unsaid words. We also learned how hearing, understanding, remembering, evaluating, and responding together make a perfect listening complex. I'm sure the students must have learned a lot from this session. I
Thank you.
again I again extend my sincere thanks to you, ma'am, on the behalf of all the members of Debating Society, Dayanand College, Hisar. I would also like to thank our principal, sir, Dr. Vikramjit Singh, for his valuable cooperation in organizing this workshop. I also extend my thanks to my team members, Dr. Shami Nagpal, convener of the workshop, Mr. Chetan Sharma, organizing secretary, Mr. Vijay Singh, Dr. Hemant Sharma, Madam Manju Sharma, Mr. Manoj Bindal, Madam Urvashi, and Mr. Sushil Rajpal for all his cooperation. I also thank all the students associated with us for showing their interest in this workshop. Again, thank you everyone and have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Welcome, dear.
Thank you. Thank you so much once again. And we'll be in touch. It was really nice meeting you here on this platform. Thank you, ma'am.
Same here. Same here.
Okay, ma'am.
So I take leave of you.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Congratulations for organizing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. कल तो बहुत स्मूथ गया था देखा तुमने